Brompton Cemetery is classified as one of the Magnificent Seven Cemeteries of London and is managed by the Royal Parks in West Brompton in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Established by Act of Parliament, it opened in 1840, originally as the West London and Westminster Cemetery. It was consecrated by the then Bishop of London in June 1840 and remains one of Britain's oldest and most distinguished cemeteries. There are around 35,000 monuments, from simple headstones to wealthy private mausolea, with over 200,000 resting places. It also has a small columbarium, as well as a secluded garden of remembrance for cremated remains. Initially, the high-end cemetery was established by a private company. Today, it is now property of the Crown. In the early 19th century, the city burial grounds had long been unable to cope with the number of burials and were seen as a hazard to health and an undignified way to treat the dead. In 1837, a decision was made to lay out a new burial ground in Brompton, securing the land from Lord Kensington and the Equitable Gaslight Company. The cemetery became one of 7 large new cemeteries founded by private companies in the mid-19th century, called the Magnificent Seven, forming a ring around London. The cemetery's design includes a modest sandstone domed chapel, reached by 2 symmetrical long colonnades in the style of St. Peter's Square in Rome. Below the colonnades are catacombs, which were originally conceived as a cheaper alternative to burial. In 1854, Brompton Cemetery became the London District's military cemetery and remained so for almost 100 years. The Royal Hospital Chelsea purchased a plot in the northwest corner, where they have a monument in the form of an obelisk. As a site, the cemetery is listed Grade 1 in the Heritage Register. During World War II, the cemetery suffered extensive bomb damage but has since been restored. In the 1950s and 60s, Brompton Cemetery had stopped accepting new burials, except for Poles and those joining family members. Some well-known names of families who rest here are the Clements, Fitches, Lamberts, Lewises, MacDonalds, and Sotheby's. Today, many nationalities and faiths from across the world lie in the cemetery. Besides the British, there are many notable Czechs, Slovaks, Poles, and Russians. There are also several hundred Commonwealth service personnel whose graves are registered and maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. In the late 1880s, London played host to the American Buffalo Bills Wild West show, where a number of Native American performers in the show died while on tour in Britain. The Sioux chief, Long Wolf, a veteran of the Sioux Wars, was buried here in 1892. He shared a grave with a 1-year-old Sioux girl named White Star, who died from falling from her mother's horse. Little Chief and Good Robe's baby son, Red Penny, who also travelled in the show, was also buried here. Notable Polish figures originally buried here include the founder of the Polish resistance and a former Prime Minister of Poland. 2 Polish bishops were also buried here. Aside from the stonemasons and sculptor's craft, there is a vast array of lettering, decorative ironwork, and ceramics. Some graves and mausolea are the work of noted artists and architects. The pine trees in the cemetery were imported from Poland. There are also lime trees which were planted in the 1830s. There are also wild cabbages, asparagus, garlic, grapevines, and a display of fungi. Over 200 species of moth and butterfly have been identified in the cemetery, and despite the absence of permanent water, there have even been sightings of amphibians. Many mammals also live in the cemetery, including bats, rodents, squirrels, foxes, and many different birds. The cemetery's grass is even protected as a habitat for many invertebrates. Beatrix Potter, who lived nearby, enjoyed walking in the cemetery. It's thought she may have taken some of the names from the tombstones for some of her characters. Brompton Cemetery has featured in a number of films, including in Sherlock Holmes, Stormbreaker, and Johnny English. The cemetery even has a reputation for being a popular cruising ground. If you want to visit the cemetery, it's open to the public daily all year round. It permits dogs and cyclists, it's traffic free, and it's free entry.